You have to trust me on this. It's the only way we survive this.
Okay. But you owe me an explanation.
Pretend to be my wife tonight, he said. She said, only if you stop pretending you're fine. He walked into the gala with the weight of 1,000 unspoken words pressing against his chest, wearing a smile so practiced it had become its own kind of lie. Ethan Calloway was the kind of man who made rooms go quiet, not because he demanded attention, but because everything about him radiated the quiet authority of someone who had never once let anyone see him break. He was 38 years old, the founder of a charitable foundation that had rebuilt schools in 3 countries, and tonight, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and the soft clink of champagne glasses, he was about to do something he had never done before, ask a stranger to save him. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of one moment to change everything, hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, drop a comment below, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. You are exactly why this channel exists. Her name was Mara Sullivan, and she was not supposed to be there. She was the last-minute replacement photographer for the event, still wearing the navy dress she'd pulled from the back of her closet, still carrying the quiet grief of a woman who had learned, very recently, that grief does not wait for convenient moments. She had lost her mother 3 months ago. She had lost her apartment 2 weeks after that. And she had almost lost herself somewhere in between, until a friend handed her this assignment and told her that the world doesn't stop spinning just because your heart does. So she picked up her camera. She walked through those marble doors. And that is when she saw him. Ethan was standing near the edge of the ballroom, slightly apart from the crowd, the way a man stands when he is physically present but mentally somewhere else entirely. Mara had photographed hundreds of events, hundreds of faces, and she had developed a quiet instinct for the ones hiding something. His jaw was too tight. His eyes scanned the room with the efficiency of someone performing a task, not enjoying a celebration. And when a silver-haired woman in a sequined gown pointed across the ballroom in his direction and began leading a small group toward him, Mara watched the color change almost imperceptibly in his face, not fear exactly, but something adjacent to it. He moved before he thought. He turned, and he found her eyes, and something in the desperation of that gaze made Mara freeze. He crossed the room in 12 steps. She counted. And then he was standing in front of her, close enough that she could see the slight tremor in his throat when he swallowed, and he said, very quietly, that he needed a favor. That his late wife's family had flown in from overseas, people who had spent years trying to prove he was unworthy of her, people who had never believed he had truly loved her, and that they had made it clear, through back channels and pointed comments, that they believed he had moved on indecently fast, that he had never grieved properly, that he was cold and calculating and empty. He said he just needed someone to stand beside him tonight. To hold his hand. To make it look like he had found something worth living for again, so they would stop looking at him like he was a man who had thrown away something sacred. He said it would mean nothing. Just one evening. Just pretend. Mara looked at him for a long moment. The ballroom hummed around them. Somewhere behind her, a string quartet began playing something achingly slow and soft. And she said, in a voice that was steadier than she felt, that she would do it, but only if he stopped pretending he was fine. Because she had been watching him for 4 minutes and he was not fine. And she was tired, she said, of people performing okayness for the comfort of everyone around them. She had done it for 3 months. She recognized it the way you recognize a scar that matches your own. He stared at her. No one had said anything like that to him in 2 years. They walked into the crowd together, and what happened next was not what either of them planned. They had agreed to perform, to play a role, to construct a fiction graceful enough to satisfy the skeptics watching from across the room. But somewhere between the first introduction and the moment his late wife's aunt pressed a photograph into his hands, a photograph of his wife on their wedding day, luminous and laughing, the performance cracked. His hand tightened around Mara's. Not as theater. As reflex. As the involuntary reaching of a man who has been holding himself together with sheer force of will for so long that his body had simply forgotten how to let go. And Mara, who who understood the specific gravity of a grief that no one else in the room could see, did not pull away. She held on. She stood beside him while he looked at that photograph, and she did not fill the silence with comfort or cleverness or any of the things people say when they don't know what else to do. She simply stayed. And in staying, she gave him something he had not known he was starving for, the permission to feel it without performing something else on top of it. Later, when the crowds thinned and the chandeliers dimmed to something softer, they sat together at a small table near the window, and he told her about his wife. Her name had been Claire. She had laughed loudly in quiet places and whispered in loud ones, as though she had always had the volume settings of the world reversed. She had loved morning rain and terrible puns and the specific shade of light that comes just before sunset. She had died on a Tuesday, which he said had always seemed wrong to him, that a Tuesday should get to be the last day of something so extraordinary. He had not spoken her name out loud in 4 months. And as he spoke it now, something in his posture slowly, almost invisibly, unknotted itself. Mara told him about her mother. About how she had been the kind of woman who pressed flowers between book pages and left them for you to find years later, long after she was gone. About how grief had made her feel like a stranger in her own life, like she was watching herself from a distance, going through motions she couldn't quite feel. About how picking up the camera tonight had been an act of pure survival, not inspiration. He listened the way people rarely listen, without waiting for his turn to speak, without reshaping her words into something more manageable. He simply received what she offered, and that, she would think later, was its own quiet form of kindness. They did not fall in love that night. That is not what this story is about. What happened was both smaller and larger than that. Two people who had been locked inside their own separate silences found, for one evening, an unlocked door. They did not walk through it, but they stood at the threshold together, and they looked at each other, and they understood that healing is not a solitary act. That sometimes the most profound thing another person can do for you is refuse to pretend alongside you. That sometimes the truest kindness is someone looking at you and saying, "I see that you are not okay, and I am not leaving." When Mara finally gathered her camera bag to go, Ethan walked her to the door. He thanked her, and she said there was nothing to thank. He said she was wrong. She smiled, and it was the first real smile either of them had produced all evening. If this story moved something in you, if you've ever worn a smile that didn't belong to you, or held yourself together in a room full of people who couldn't see you breaking, please like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and leave a comment below telling us about a moment when someone's simple presence changed everything for you. Before this story ends, drop a white heart in the comments if you believe that sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is admit we are not fine. Outside, the night air was cold and clean and full of the particular stillness that follows something significant. Ethan stood at the top of the steps long after her car disappeared, hands in his pockets, looking at a sky that had not changed but somehow seemed different than it had 2 hours before. He thought about Claire. He thought about Tuesdays. He thought about a woman who had held his hand not because she had been asked to, but because she had seen him, truly seen him, and decided that was enough of a reason. He went home that night and, for the first time in 2 years, did not perform okayness for an empty room. He sat down. He let himself feel it. And somewhere in the dark and the quiet, something small and stubborn and alive began, very slowly, to grow back.